Here, Lawyer Davis, in case you need more. Good to be at the table with you.
You too. We should have a case together.
Well, if only. It's a great turnout.
No.
All rise. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina is now sitting for ceremonial purposes. The Honorable Kenneth D. Bell, Judge of the United States District Court, presiding. All persons having business before this court are admonished to draw near, and shall be heard. God save these United States, this honorable court.
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. This memorial session of Superior Court is now in session. The Honorable Louis A. Bledsoe III, Judge presiding. All persons having business before this court are admonished to draw near, and they shall be heard. God save the state of North Carolina and this honorable court. Please be seated and come to order.
Welcome, everyone. We gather together in a joint session of the federal and state courts to recognize the service and the life of one of our number, Mr. Martin Brackett, Jr.
This memorial service is a time-honored tradition, and the brothers and sisters of the bar pay homage to the life and times of one of their profession, of one who has shared this unique discipline that binds us together.
Today, we recognize that life and those achievements as a matter of public record and for the sake of our historic and corporate memory.
I will now recognize Carrie Davis, President of the Mecklenburg County Bar, who will now give remarks on behalf of the 26th Judicial District Bar.
Granted.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Davis. I'm the president of the Mecklenburg County Bar. And we are grateful that everybody has gathered here today. We are grateful for your support and your presence. We offer our sincere condolences to the family of Martin L. Brackett, Jr. And at this time, I would recognize Brad Cutro, a member of the Memorials Committee, to tell us more about this time-honored tradition.
Your Honor, with leave of court, I would like to face the gallery.
You may.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brad Cutro from the Mecklenburg County Bar Memorials Committee, and it's my honor to welcome you all here today for this memorial service. I'd especially like to welcome Martin's family, his wife Lisa, his sons Alex and Hunter, his daughters Amelia and Lauren, and his brother Doug. I know Martin was very proud of his family. For the past 7 or so decades, the Mecklenburg County Bar has held memorial sessions of court for our recently deceased members, taking the opportunity to remember and celebrate their lives. As far as we can determine, we're the only local bar in the country that has this tradition. We're proud of it and the role that these sessions play in preserving our bar's history, both as individual practitioners and as a collective. Today, Richard Vinroot, one of Martin's law partners, will present a resolution honoring him. That resolution will be presented to the court, and the filed resolution will be included in the minutes of this court and Mecklenburg County Superior Court and maintained with all the preceding resolutions in a bound volume. It will also be available on the Mecklenburg County Bar's website. And I can say from my own experience, that's a wonderful resource to remember the accomplishments and the lives of our deceased fellow members of the bar and to understand more about our bar's history. Let me now turn this proceeding over to Mr. Vinroot.
Your Honor, I'm Richard Vinroot, and on behalf of Mecklenburg County Bar, we'd like to thank your court, both courts, for hosting this special tradition of the bar and in its recognition of our recently deceased members. I'm going to turn around in a minute. I'm honored to offer the following resolution in behalf of the bar in recognition of Martin Luther Brackett, Jr. And before doing so, would like to recognize the members of Martin's family who are present with us today. They are, as previously noted, his beloved wife, Lisa, his sons, Hunter and his wife, Christy, Alex and his wife, Callie, his daughters, Lauren and her husband, George, and Amelia, and Martin's grandsons, Jones, Ben, and McKay, as well as his brother, Doug, who is also a member of this bar, and Doug's wife, Sarah Gwen, and other nieces and nephews. Your honors, if permissible, I would also like to face the audience in the presentation of this brief resolution, and at its conclusion, request that the court also permit any others who may wish to speak of Martin to do so. This resolution and memorial is offered on behalf of the Mecklenburg County Bar in recognition and honor of and in gratitude for the wonderful life, legal career, and service of our dear friend and my longtime law partner, Martin Luther Brackett, Jr. Martin was born in Charlotte on February 23rd, 1947, and died peacefully in this city just days shy of his 75th birthday on February 9, 2022. I might add, I met him when he was 8 years old. He was the water boy on our junior high football team, and we thought he was a brat, Doug. He was the second of three sons of Martin L. Luke Brackett Sr. and Helen Smith Brackett, who was predeceased by his baby brother, Charlie, and is survived by his big brother, Doug, who is also present today, as I noted, and is also a member of this bar. Martin was an Eagle Scout, an all-city football player at Charlotte's East Mecklenburg High School. He attended Davidson College on a football scholarship, from which he graduated in 1969 prior to attending law school at Chapel Hill, from which he graduated in 1972. Following military service, Martin began law practice in Charlotte, first with his brother Doug, as associates with Alan A. Bailey, and thereafter with his close friend, Bill Sitton, who's also present here today, before joining Robinson, Bradshaw, and Henson, with whom he practiced for most of his long and distinguished career as a preeminent trial lawyer in our community. As a lawyer, Martin was formally recognized as one of the very best and brightest in our legal profession, and one of the most distinguished citizens of our community and our state. He was for many years a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, also served as a member of the Board of Trustees of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, as a permanent member of the Fourth Circuit Judicial Conference, as a fellow in the American Bar Association and of Outward Bound, and as a member and chairman of the Charlotte Auditorium Coliseum Convention Center Authority. In all of those associations and many others, which were an important part of his significant professional, personal, and civic life, Martin was indeed a man for all seasons. But for so many of us here today, Martin was beloved for more than all of these notable professional and civic accomplishments. For me, and I suspect for many of you, Martin was the guy who always took our calls, listened patiently to our concerns, and then said, "Let me check a few things and I'll get back to you," which he always did, without fanfare, without fail. Whether it was something large or small, Martin was the quintessential go-to guy for good counsel and advice. And to this point, I would like to quote my own son, Rich, who all too frequently had to call Martin from Greensboro or other locations between Charlotte and Chapel Hill during his college years on occasions when our state highway patrol pulled him over for one or more transgression, who said admiringly of Martin at the time of his death last year, "Dad, you do know, don't you, that whenever my friends and I ever got into any trouble," and that happened quite frequently, "in high school or college, we always called Mr. Brackett because we believed he was the only real lawyer in your law firm." And when those boys called, I can assure you, Martin responded. There are many young men from Davidson College and even some in our law firm who made similar calls and got return help from Martin. I know you're there. You know what I'm talking about. Finally, I would note that as a Boy Scout growing up, Martin memorized and frequently promised to live in accordance with the Scout law and the Scout oath, respectively. I suspect there may be some Boy Scouts in the audience today. I know Doug is, and I know others of you are. And if so, you'll remember the Scout law and the Scout oath, and on every Tuesday or so night, you stand up and repeat those words. Thus, Martin pledged every Tuesday night or so with Doug to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, and brave, clean, and reverent. We may have to give Martin some slack on obedient and reverent, but I believe we all agree that he lived up to the other 10 very well every day of his life. Moreover, I'm absolutely confident that everyone here today agrees with me that every day of the wonderful life of Martin Brackett, he honored the 6 words midway through the Scout oath that I think many of the Boy Scouts also remember, when he said he would help other people at all times. He absolutely honored those words in the best tradition of our law profession every day of his life. Thus, your honors, with love and admiration for this very good man and his very good life, I respectfully move that this court adjourn today in memory and honor of Martin Luther Brackett, Jr., and that this resolution be stamped and inscribed in the minutes of this court and retained in the memorials of deceased attorneys in the office of the clerk of Mecklenburg County Superior Court, with copies hereof made available to the members of Martin's beloved family. And before I sit down, my partner, Ward McKeithen, who helped me say what I've just said, say a few words, and I will sit down. Thank you. Slowly.
My gracious, Martin practiced law in a lot of courts before some fine judges, but I promise you, without a doubt, he's absolutely thrilled to be in this place and before these outstanding judges and the rest of us. This place is magnificent. This is my first visit, and this happened because the gentleman sitting over there made it happen, and it's a real gift to the whole community and particularly to the practicing bar. I happen to have been chairman of the Memorials Committee for 10 years before George Hanna took it off and still does it, along with Bob Chapman. We haven't had a proceeding this impressive in my entire experience, and I'm very thankful to it for all of you. I was thinking about Martin, and he was our lawyer. I was sharing a cab ride home from a fairly contentious deposition in New York. On the way out to LaGuardia, my fellow passenger in the cab was Bill Deal, the fellow with whom I'd had the contentious day, as you might imagine. And Bill said to me, this all being 35 to 40 years ago, Ward, your firm ought to take a run at hiring Martin Brackett. And the rest of it's history. A wonderful addition to our firm 35 years ago, and a dear friend. Richard was talking about Martin being all folks' lawyer. I had a 62 Volkswagen. I was riding home from Fayetteville after a trial that had gone okay. And I got caught speeding at 68. And I didn't know whether to thank the fellow and give me a certification that it would go that fast or just, grin and bear it. I got back to the office and I said, Martin, you won't believe it, but my Volkswagen will go 68 miles an hour. And he said, let me look after it. Let me tend to it. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And about a week later, he said, can you live with a defective muffler? And I said to myself, how did you convert this speeding ticket to a to a defective muffler with no points or problems. And he said, well, I just know some folks down that way. He knew some folks down that way, up that way. I mean, he was our lawyer. Martin and I shared about 8 walks in the backcountry in the high Rocky Mountains over about 10 or 12 years. We'd go out there for a week. The only one that really had a sense of what they were doing was Martin. He'd round up the equipment, buy the food, and if anybody complained, he said he'd turn the freeze-dry buying over to somebody else. Nobody ever complained. And you learn a lot about each other walking around in the woods for 5 or 6 days. This is what I said earlier about Martin in the woods with us. He was always concerned for the welfare of his companions. He was simply the best outdoorsman in the group, but never with any show or pretense. It was a real pleasure, better stated, privilege, to be with Martin in the backcountry, or for that matter, anywhere, including being his law partner for over 30 years. He was indeed a true friend and terrific companion, always available and totally reliable, always of good spirit and genuinely concerned for the well-being of others. We were indeed blessed by Martin, good and loving life and friendship. Thank you.
The court would invite any who would like to speak of their memories of Martin to approach the podium.
I've now approached the podium. May I face the audience?
You may.
Thank you. For those of you that don't know me, I'm David Wright, and I have been at Robinson Bradshaw. It's hard for me to say this, 39 years. I overlapped with Martin, I think maybe 36 or 37 of those years. And one of the great blessings about being at Robinson Bradshaw is you get to learn from so many good people and so many good lawyers. And I thought I might just mention a few things that I learned from Martin, for which I'm grateful. I believe, as I was thinking about this, the first time I met Martin was on a tennis court at Charlotte Country Club. Buddy Wester had enlisted me to play and explained that the firm was recruiting Martin to join the firm. I was not sure why my presence on a tennis court was either needed or desirable to help persuade Martin of the advantages of joining Robinson Bradshaw. I was either at that time, and I can't recall, a summer associate, or I had just joined the firm. I cannot recall which. I knew precious little about practicing law and was not instrumental in any way in Martin joining the firm, which he did about a year after I started. But I was instrumental in securing a victory for Buddy in a doubles match over Martin and Bill Sitton, and I later decided that must have been the predominant motive behind my invitation. Many things stick out when I recall the years I spent with Martin, and I'll speak only of a couple today. The first is the importance of service. We live in a society where status is more important than service. And if you ask folks today what makes for a good lawyer, you would get a wide variety of answers. But one of the most overlooked, and one that I would argue is the most important, is service. There's no one that I have ever met in the profession who was better at serving clients than Martin. The distinctive nature of that service was that it was holistic, taking care of details and sometimes the drudgery to help clients to advance their cause and to solve their problems. Service is seldom glamorous, but it is the most important key to success. And Martin was flat out committed to it. That was just like breathing for him to serve clients. And what that yielded was loyal and very grateful clients. The second thing I learned from him was the importance of people and relationships. If a lawyer thinks he or she can succeed as an advocate solely by dint of intellectual effort, master of legal principles, and effective communication and persuasion, that lawyer is wrong. The profession of lawyering involves people. It requires you to know people, to be interested in them, to care about what matters to them, no matter who they are, clients, witnesses, fellow lawyers, judges, courtroom personnel, the staff in a law firm. And Martin cared about people. He invested in people and made it a point to get to know people. People were important to him no matter their station. And it was such a distinctive part of who he was, those of us who practiced with him, that it was just a high privilege to see that. And as Richard and Ward both alluded to, that quality led to many in our firm to call upon Martin as a fixer. And I say that in the most charitable possible sense that I can, because we needed fixing for many of our clients, friends, family members. But what is true, absolutely true, is that if you had a problem, particularly one that was insurmountable or perceived to be insurmountable, then you would reach to your phone and you would dial extension 8347. And many of us did that time and time again. And what he would do is he would drop what he was doing. And this is a modern word. He would be present. He would be present with you. He would then open a magical Rolodex and spend whatever time was necessary to deal with the problem. He was an absolute master. So many other things I could say, time will not permit and others will add. I'm grateful, though, for this opportunity to remember a friend and a stellar colleague. When Martin would pop by my office, he would usually start by saying, "Lawyer Wright, how are you doing today?" Boy, I miss that.
Mr. Ryan.
Please, court. Good afternoon. I'm Doug I. We've heard from 3 Robinson Bradshaw partners of Martin's. I'm going to represent the other side of the V for just a second. I knew Martin as a friend, a brother at the bar, for pretty much my whole time in Charlotte, but our relationship went to a new level when the pedestrian walkway at Charlotte Motor Speedway collapsed in May of 2000, and there were 100 people hurt, and Martin represented 2 of the worst injured people there, and I represented one of the defendants. As things happen in lawsuits, there were dozens, let's put it dozens of lawsuits, and finally some order was brought to the chaos, and Judge Spainhour was assigned to handle the case, and we had a first meeting, and we're in the Superior Court, and the room was seething. There were probably 60 plaintiffs' lawyers over here and 4 defense lawyers over here, and it was a little bit of a mob scene. And Martin was at the table. I was at the table. Judge Spainhour walked out of the back, got halfway up the stairs to the bench, looked, saw the seething mass, and said, "Brackett, I in the back." And Martin and I looked at each other and said, "Okay." And we went in the back, and Judge Spainhour said, "I'm not talking to all those people. I'm only talking to the 2 of you all from now on. I don't want to see anybody else." And that was sort of how it all started. And every other Monday for about 3 years, we got on the phone at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Martin and Judge Spainhour and I got on the phone and talked about what had been happening in the case for the preceding 2 weeks. And Martin and I forged a relationship there. The scout oath that Richard read, that trustworthy is the one that comes to the top of the pile. You could always trust whatever Martin said, and you were well placed not to say something that would cause you to not trust him, not to trust you. We ended up working our way through years of litigation, and he got a great result for his clients, and it all got dealt with. And it's thinking here today that both Judge Spainhour and Martin are both gone is a real it's really sobering for me. But for someone who was across the aisle from Martin, he became one of my great friends. And we had all sorts of capers together. Whenever he needed a fool to do something with him, I was usually the one who tagged along in those later years. But he was, Lisa, a wonderful friend and lawyer, and I treasure him forever.
Judge Conrad.
I hope it pleases the court.
Well enough.
Among the many gifts God gave Martin Brackett were a sonorous voice and a sense of humor. And both of these gifts are reflected in this brief clip from my investiture 18 years ago.
Court recognizes Martin L. Brackett, Jr. to make further remarks. Thank you, Your Honor. For the benefit of the lawyers in the group, I think most of you, like I, looked at the jury box when the group was seated, and the first thought that crossed my mind was, thank you, God, for peremptory challenges. But on second thought, Judge Conrad, if that's the best I can explain it, it's satisfying. And I'm going to leave you out, but to the Conrad children who are assembled, your father has asked me to pass along one thing to you. As you can see by this magnificent courtroom today, all the dignitaries here, a letter from the president, all the bright lights. Being a federal judge, as he has told you over and over again, is a truly big deal. While I and the others who appear before him are required to refer to him as judge or his real preference, Your Honor, which you might bear in mind at allowance time. You're not required to do that, but a little more respect really would be. With that said, I want to speak to you for a few minutes today about labels, and in particular.
So Martin would go on to say that although we were different in many ways, his name is Martin Luther Brackett, for God's sakes. He looked past labels in deciding to assist me in my nomination to the bench. Martin had the capacity to see the good in others regardless of where they came from or how different from him they might be. He had the gift of friendship. It was said of Thomas More that he was born and made for friendship. Such was Martin Brackett. Martin never met a stranger. Well, that's not quite true. He met a lot of strangers sitting on the city bench on the square during the middle of the day. But they weren't strangers for long, is my point. Martin loved trial advocacy. He loved the courtroom. Although not one that sought accolades, he was proud of the fact, as Richard said, that he was a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers. He was indeed a great trial lawyer, one of the best of our bar. He combined a competitive nature with a command of facts and an understanding of human nature. And although he was not afraid to take a case to trial, indeed he loved to do that, he was at heart a problem solver. He talked frequently about the case that Doug I talked about, the Charlotte Speedway case, considered one of the biggest disasters in NASCAR history. And his involvement in that case with many of you and how the lawyers for many sides worked together in a professional way to process a very difficult case. And of course, he loved his family. Perhaps that is what defined him more than anything else. He was constantly talking about you all. I learned a lot from Martin about three important L's: law, life, and leadership. and his absence is deeply felt. I'll end with this. On February 9th, 2022, Doug I called me and told me Martin had taken a turn for the worse and was in hospice care. And we both made time to visit that day, and Lisa and the family were so gracious to allow us to visit. Doug picked me up at the courthouse and we drove to the Bracketts. We talked with Martin, held his hand, told him we loved him, and then we left. And as we did, Martin's eyes followed us to the door. I didn't know then that he would die later that day, but I had a profound sense of gratitude that I had connected with this friend one last time. Lingering in my memory is the sound of Martin's voice, the sound of his laughter, and the memory of his searching eyes meeting mine, and ultimately the great sense of loss his departure has created. But I believe we will see each other again, where in the words of the great hymnist Charles Wesley, "'Tis good at thy word to be here. 'Tis better in thee to be gone, and see thee in glory appear, and rise to a share of thy throne. To mourn for thy coming is sweet, to weep at thy longer delay. But thou whom we hasten to meet shall chase all our sorrows away. The tears shall be wiped from our eyes when thee we behold in the cloud, and echo the joys of the skies, and shout to the trumpet of God."
I see a good many of the well-known loquacious out there. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
I'll speak.
That seems fine enough.
It is. Oh. Approach, Mr. Sitton.
Thank you. I'm the guy whose partner was stolen by. I'm Bill Sitton. I had the great good fortune of being hired by Bailey Brackett in Brackett in August of 1978. The firm was run by Alan Bailey, who was an icon, a truly successful litigator who commanded respect. But after the firm had moved locations more than once, I noticed that the office closest to Alan Bailey was Martin Brackett's office, whether it was a civil, criminal, domestic litigation. He depended on Martin, whether it was a Betty Lou Johnson murder trial in Raleigh, or suing a prominent attorney in a nearby county who allowed a statute of limitations to run on his client. Martin was always there. He was always working for the right answer. He was always acting in the best interest of his client. For me, the most remarkable aspect of Martin Brackett was his sense of humor. It could be acerbic, sarcastic, but somehow our DNA matched. I appreciated that sense of humor more than any other attribute of his. I remember one day he received a call from the matriarch of an old Charlotte family. She had a handyman who was in some criminal trouble, and she wanted Martin to help him. Well, Martin looked it up, thinking it's a DALR or maybe simple assault. It was a sexual molestation case. Folks, that is mean business if you've ever been involved in one. But Martin agreed to represent the handyman because any lawyer's first duty is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. I'll never forget walking in the office one morning, and I believe I knew there was a hearing scheduled in that case. And I walked by Martin's office and glanced in there. And he's sitting behind his desk with these Groucho Marx glasses with eyebrows, a black mustache. And I looked at him, I said, Martin, what are you doing? What is that? He said, oh, this is my sexual molestation defense kit. I was lucky to practice with him. And Doug, you and I are the only people whose names were on a masthead with Martin Brackett, who are here today or anywhere. We practiced for a couple of years. He went on to Robinson Bradshaw. By 1988, I was in the throes of the most horrible addiction, painkillers. And my addiction ran the usual course. I called Martin one night from the Union County Jail, and I asked him if he would help me. Of course, he said yes. And for the next 15 months, Martin Brackett fought for me. I mean, he fought for me to try and save my license. He went toe-to-toe with 2 DAs, neither of whom was Peter Gilchrist, until he hammered out a resolution that allowed me to keep practicing law. I offered to pay him, and he refused. And I decided then that the best way to repay that debt was to try and be the best lawyer I can be. And I've tried to do that for the last 35 years. Raymond Chandler was a great novelist in the mid-20th century. His most popular character was a detective named Marlin. I think Humphrey Bogart played him in a movie or two. In one of his books, Raymond Chandler wrote his definition of a hero. Down life's mean streets, a man must go, who is not himself mean. He is neither tarnished nor afraid. He is a hero by instinct, by inevitability, without thinking it or saying it. Martin Brackett was my hero. He's the best lawyer I've ever known. And Lisa, he was a better man. Thank you, sir, for allowing me to speak.
It's a tremendous honor and privilege for me to be able to preside with Judge Bell today at this memorial service for Martin Brackett, my longtime friend and colleague. I met Martin nearly 40 years ago when we both started at Robinson Bradshaw. I began as a first-year associate at the firm in October 1985, and the firm stole Martin away from Mr. Sitton 2 months later as he joined in December of that year. As all who knew him know, and as we've heard reiterated today by those who have spoken, Martin was a decent and honorable man, a wonderful and loyal friend, mentor, and colleague, an outstanding lawyer, a devoted father and husband, a man's man, but a man with a kind and generous heart. As I think of my many memories of Martin, I consistently recall, as others here have alluded to, his constant desire to help others. He wanted to help you. He wanted to help his colleagues, his friends, his family, his clients, the broader community, anybody who was hurting. He truly thrived and took great pleasure in helping others, from the richest CEO to the poorest of the poor. He provided a lesson for all of us in how a lawyer can use his skills and judgment to do good things for all people. I had the great pleasure of working with Martin on various matters through the years, but I have one particular memory as a young lawyer that, while not funny, proved formative for me as a young lawyer. It was shortly after Martin arrived at the firm, so I had not been practicing law for more than a couple of months. And he took me with him down to state court, where he successfully argued a motion for summary judgment. I remember him calmly walking the judge through a series of fatal admissions he had obtained in the depositions of the other side's primary witnesses, and it left the judge no choice but to enter summary judgment dismissing the plaintiff's claims. He made it all look very easy, far easier than it actually was. And I distinctly remember for the first time, I had the feeling of a light bulb going off. So this is how you put together these litigation rules and tools that I'd learned about in school. This is how it all works together in order to obtain a successful result. I always remembered that. It was a lesson I never forgot. After I left the firm nearly 10 years ago to go on the bench, Martin would periodically call to chat or to get lunch. He called those get-togethers friendship maintenance. And I'll always be grateful that he took the initiative to get us together. Although he was a Democrat and I was a Republican, we could always discuss the issues of the day with humor, smiles, and always lots and lots of laughter. Martin was one of our best, and like all of you, I really miss him.
Further comments? Well, how lucky are we all to have known Martin Brackett. There will be a reception following this ceremonial proceeding on the 6th floor terrace. Please feel free to join. Just take the same elevators that you took to get here, but just stop on the 6th floor and someone will show you out to the terrace. The court orders that the comments presented at this hour be spread upon the minutes of this court and filed with copies presented to the family of our departed brother at the bar.
On behalf of the judges of Mecklenburg County Superior Court, the court orders that the comments at this hour be spread upon the minutes of this state court and filed with the clerk of court for Mecklenburg County.
The court orders that the U.S. Marshal adjourn this joint memorial session of the court in memory and out of respect for Martin Brackett, Jr. Fare thee well, colleague, and Godspeed.
Sheriff, adjourn this court in honor and memory of Martin Luther Brackett, Jr.
All rise. Oh yay, oh yay. This memorial session of the United States District Court, Selection District of North Carolina is adjourned in the memory of and out of respect for Martin L. Brackett, Jr.
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. This joint session of federal and state court is adjourned in memory of and out of respect for Mr. Martin L. Brackett, Jr.
See you all down on the 6th.
That's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're